something happened there.
Okay, now he's recording. I see it in the
Perfect.
stage. So then at the end,
Good.
when the call ends, you just need to do Craig leave. So the
Perfect.
same format and everything, but just leave instead. And then you can send me the download link later and I'll upload it and everything.
Sick. So we're good to go here.
Yeah.
All right. Were there any opening announcements you wanted to lead out with, Ant? Or
Sure. I think there's probably a lot of things people are curious about, so might as well cover it for the people that are here. So, yeah, as many of you know, Aleo participated in LizCon slash ETH Lisbon this past week. So a lot of our team was actually there in person. We participated in the as a workshop speaker, so demonstrating some of the aspects of our programming language called Leo. I know it was recorded, so I guess whenever we get the recording from that video, we'll put it out there. And I think it'll be a good resource for folks that are interested in building with Leo. So that's one thing. And then we also hosted our ZK hack launch event along with a few other zero knowledge proof related projects. So Noma was another sponsor. Zero Knowledge Podcast was another sponsor. So that was a really great event. Got to connect with a number of different individuals, share a little bit about Aleo, and drum up support. I think Sam and I were looking at some of the statistics of our community, and we've actually had an increase in new members joining. I think probably because of all the activities in Lisbon. So that's really good to see. And the primary focus right now is just getting ready for the launch of the incentivized testnet, which I know everybody is very eager for. Right now, the date for the incentivized testnet is slated to be November 15th, which we've communicated in the past. Right now, our CEO, Howard Wu, is heads down working on the incentivized testnet along with our other core engineering team. So this is essentially the primary focus as of right now.
when we say heads down, like you can't get a hold of him for anything that is not related to the testnet.
Yeah,
This is all that he is working on.
yeah, exactly. And the thing is, I'm supposed to speak at the Solana Breakpoint conference. We'll actually be making an interesting announcement there. I can't discuss anything on this call, but I'm actually stepping in to speak for him. So I know people would much rather have Howard present, but um, I guess I'm the next best thing that they got. So yeah, he's
Testnet comes
totally
first.
heads down on that. Yeah, exactly. And we want to hold true to our promise to the community. So that's an update there. In terms of the parameters for the incentivized testnet, I know a lot of you are probably frustrated, right? Because we said we wanted to put out a blog post outlining those parameters and we want to get all your feedback, which we're still going to do. I was planning on putting it out last week on Thursday, but there was a small development that occurred. And so instead of putting out information that would need to be altered later, it was decided to hold off on that announcement. The goal is to get that blog post out tomorrow. I think there's one final thing that we just want to ensure that we have correct when we put out this public post. Otherwise, I think it'll just create a lot of chaos if we make changes. So you can be looking out for that. There will be an announcement. It will be posted specifically to this community of people. And on Wednesday, we actually have a community call. So we have our community calls every 3 weeks. It was supposed to happen last week. I moved it because we want to essentially have most of the time for the community call to discuss feedback on the parameters for the incentivized testnet, as well as cover topics related to the ambassadors program. So I know a lot of people have been asking about that as well. I've actually gotten a lot of different proposals from folks. Some of our members from the Russian Telegram community, other folks that have just participated on Discord have sent me feedback. So I'm really trying to take all those points into consideration and create sort of an initial program where we focus in on one specific area that we'd like help from our ambassadors with, and then sort of test that out to see how things progress and how we can continue to build out the ambassadors program. So I think the general idea is, instead of going out with like this huge, like really complex program, we're going to start with one focus area, try to engage our community members, and then sort of build out from there, and then figure out, okay, how do you enjoy this working style? Do we have the right incentives in mind, right? If you filled out that form, you probably noticed we said, what is your motivation for wanting to be an ambassador? So we want to make sure everybody is aligned on that front. So that will also be discussed during the community call on Wednesday. And if you need the dates and times for all of that, just go to our community calendar. You can find it linked in the calendar channel on Discord, but basically it's aleo.org/community/calendar. You can find everything there. And then the last thing I would say is that the setup ceremony. So as you all know, universal setup, right? It's closed. If you're scheduled for that, we're still processing through contributors. So yeah, you'll just have to wait to hear from us about that if you are a contributor that will participate, and then we'll add you to a separate channel with the instructions. For the outer setup, you can continue to participate in that. It's still running. If you haven't already, we've had the reliability score implemented for some time now, so you'll be able to know right off the bat whether or not you meet our minimum requirements. Unfortunately, if you don't meet the minimum requirements, you just simply can't participate, because it would hold up the rest of our queue, and we definitely don't want that. As for the inner setup, technically it has launched today. However, we have not opened it up yet to the broader community, because we essentially wanted to do a soft launch, and have some of our internal core team members contribute, just to make sure that everything's running properly. Reason we're doing this is because, we want to avoid putting out the inner setup and then having a bunch of problems. So far, it looks like everything's going well. So assuming that this continues on the path that it's continuing on, this week we will open it up, and we'll put out an announcement when that happens. Don't worry about rushing into it. We're going to be running all the ceremonies until December 1st. We've extended it because we want to make sure everybody has a chance to contribute. The inner setup is probably it is the least complex of all the ceremonies. So if you didn't have the opportunity or the requirements to participate in the universal outer, this is a perfect opportunity. You'll still receive an NFT for contributing, and all you really need is a stable internet connection, and a standard laptop or desktop computer. Unless you're using like a Chromebook or something that's very old, like you shouldn't have a problem contributing. I'm gonna have my own parents do it, and they barely even use a computer. So anybody can really participate in this. One thing I will say, and I will reiterate it multiple times because I've gotten a slew of messages from people about it. When you contribute to the outer setup, it's really, really, really important that you save your second key pair. So if you look at the instructions that we put together, the second key pair is essentially, after you make your contribution, you'll get a notification that gives you your wallet address, which is like your public key. And then you'll get an associated confirmation key, which in our case would be your private key. You must save that information. It's very, very important that you do so. So I just wanted to highlight that again, because I know we've had some issues. And then obviously, to receive the NFT, you also want to make sure to enter your ETH address. If you have any problems, you can DM me, but we really want to be sure of that. And I guess maybe the last thing in terms of just some quick announcements. I think those are the main things. So we covered setup ceremony, current status of that, incentivized testnet stuff, ambassadors program. I think those are the main things. So with that out of the way, I guess we can jump into the freeform discussion. But
Hold up, Anthony. So your parents, who, as I believe you've said, you have not been able to convince to just buy Bitcoin, are running a setup. They're being part of the setup ceremony. How did you swing that?
How did I swing
How did you
that?
convince them? What was your pitch?
What was my pitch? I basically said, do you want to be one of the OG people that actually help set up the future of privacy on Web3, right? Because that's basically what you're doing by contributing to this setup ceremony, right? 20 years from now, if you have this NFT, you can basically flash it to anybody and say, like, hey, I was one of those people, like, back in 2021 that actually used my own computing power to generate the randomness used for, the privacy preserving primitives that everybody, hopefully, assuming Aleo is successful, which, we're definitely going to be, is powering like these Web3 applications. And I think that in and of itself is a super interesting concept. And so pitching it in that format, I think kind of got them really interested, even though they're not, crazy technology users or anything like that. I mean, they use the internet. So using that as an analogy, I think really resonated. And yeah, we're hoping to get like a lot more people involved who otherwise maybe wouldn't have been in our community already by introducing this idea and this concept to them. And I think, again, the inner setup is probably the best way to showcase this because it is a web-based, browser-based setup. So I think it is much more interactive from like a user perspective, like a user interface perspective. So yeah, I guess that was the pitch.
It's the power of NFTs, man. They won't ape into Bitcoin, but they'll ape into some NFT that you just explained to them.
Yeah, exactly. And also,
amazing.
Yeah,
because if you don't, I won't. It's my love is contingent on your setup participation. But I mean, I know you wouldn't stoop to those lows, but maybe I would. I don't know. My parents, I'm like, you guys, if you really want me to love you as much, you should contribute to the setup. I'm just joking.
Honestly, it's probably a pretty smart move for some people, maybe to get their folks to participate for sure. Maybe I could try that with my grandparents. Who knows? Maybe they would even contribute. Maybe
that would be a true test of it had we
that
done our
would
job. Although I'm looking at the Discord right now of like the setup Discord, and I don't know. I don't feel good about it. your grandparents.
Yeah, that might be a harder sell, but it would definitely be an achievement nonetheless.
Grandma might not know what private key to save. She might save the wrong one. Very possible.
Yeah.
But even at that point would be impressive for her.
Wait, I'm supposed to publish my private key?
Yeah, she might be looking for a physical key at that point. So yeah, we might have a challenge there for sure.
What we should do is you guys seen like the Salon NFT, the cube thing, where it's like you get a physical cube. Like
yeah, I heard about that. Yeah.
Wait, how does this work?
You seen this? It's like there's like a big Solana NFT drop this week or last week, 2 weeks ago. And basically it's just like different cubes. They're just like JPEG cubes, but they come with I think there's like a physical cube that you can actually acquire, and they come in different sizes. And a 4x4x4 inch cube was, there was some ridiculous sum of money.
Wait, they're backed by cubes of tungsten.
Yeah, that's right.
Isn't tungsten the stuff that you use to counterfeit gold with?
I have no idea.
It's like the metal that is the closest to gold in terms of like weight. And so if you want to make like a fake gold bullion, you take like a thin layer of gold and you wrap it around tungsten.
Wow.
I wonder why they chose that. It's very odd.
That was their original plan, and then they just decided to lean into it and say, go with tungsten.
They wrapped it in a thin layer of NFT. They thought people will buy this. Well, apparently they are.
Worked.
But,
I mean, that's interesting. Go ahead.
No. Finish. Go ahead.
I say that's actually interesting. I could see like how are they handling the like backing? Like how are they proving that this NFT is backed by one piece of metal? Because like that is actually interesting. I could see like tokenized gold bullion being something that people would actually want. I'm surprised that hasn't actually existed. I'm sure people are working on it.
There wasn't. I'm pretty sure there was like a few like years ago on the Bitcoin, like before Ethereum even. I think they had like this exact thing, tokenized shares of gold. some
Think-
physical gold.
Yeah, I think that there were like a few sketchy, like synthetic, quote unquote, pegged coins where they're like, some centralized authority is claiming that they will, basically one of these equals 1 ounce of gold, and they'll exchange it at some very high amount. It's basically like a paper product for like precious metals that has the option to do physical delivery. But I guess that's kind of the same thing. But what I'm kind of thinking serialized bullion, and you're like, this is this bullion, and this token gives you ownership to it. That would be interesting.
Yeah, I think that's the idea for a lot of the NFTs. The NFT, certificate of ownership of some real world thing. I mean, people have looked at this for deeds, for example, and a lot of other stuff, which I think is really interesting. I think the prospect is more exciting than the reality currently, just because, I mean, I think in any real or in the real world, right, the legal system under which you reside is sort of like the defining factor of what you own and don't. Because even if you and until that legal system recognizes like the NFT as the actual thing, the actual signal that you own this property, it sort of is a little bit moot, because I can just take your cube and say it's my cube, and then you're like, "But I have the token," and who's right? I mean, and I guess in the future world, I'd like to think we're all like, the society and the law has kind of taken into account this technology that we can use to prove provenance. But in today's world, it's much more complicated, especially for something like a house.
Yeah, do you know what the hell's his name? Vinay Gupta. Was one of like the OGs behind Ethereum. He has his own smart chain called Materium that is all about trying to kind of solve this problem of exactly what you're talking about, where it's like basically how to marry together a digital NFT with the real world physical item that it is purporting to represent. And the way that he does it, or the way that their system is kind of built around, is around the idea of turning like code into law, where it's basically about piggybacking on existing legal systems and all that, which, I mean, it's clever, but like the cipher, and I've argued about this with him. The cypherpunk in me wants to figure out, like, to solve it via just pure game theory, where you don't need to get the cops involved, basically, where you come up with some game whereby the winning strategy is to behave honestly in regards to, yes, this NFT is towards this object and I possess both, basically, and also how you handle that during trade. But yeah, one way or the other, it's definitely going to be very interesting, because I think that supply chain is one of like the big 3 real world use cases for blockchain that we haven't really seen develop in a meaningful way yet. There's been a few like baby projects here and there, and even like a few like big market cap projects, but they haven't really seen much real world implementation. Yeah.
Yes. Speaking of the law and the blockchain, did you see? I just dropped in the chat the Aleo calls Q&A chat. There's a CoinDesk article today about this. Did you hear about this DeFi not rug pull? It was a hack,
No.
I guess.
No.
Like some Canadian. It was like some Canadian math PhD at University of Waterloo. Basically, just took advantage of this poorly written contract and got $16 million worth of collateral out of it. And he's like, they know who he is, and they like threatened to dox him. And he's like, I'm not giving it back. You can take me to court. And he's like basically intent on testing this question of like, is code law? Because if code is law, then like the way you wrote the code, nothing wrong. It's going to be I think it'll be a really, really fascinating, interesting case.
That is really fascinating. That's going to be some very important precedents. Yeah. Are they taking him to court? It's officially happening?
I think so. I'm sure the article, I didn't read it super closely.
This is in Canada.
Yeah, exactly.
Everything cool happens in Canada, man.
I beg to differ, but
you're on this call. Raise your hand if you agree. I don't know if you can even do. Yeah, you can
Hey,
raise
man,
your hand.
Vitalik was Canadian.
Hey, Vitalik. All right, fine. But you're right. Vitalik was Canadian. There is some cool stuff in Canada. I'm not going to lie. But everything cool? Not sure.
Well, I mean, Bell Labs started computer science. But yeah, anyway. We don't need to turn this into a whole fucking nationalist.
Yeah. Anyway, actually, sorry, before we continue, I just want to mention one other thing that I forgot to say with the updates is feature bounties. So we also wrote up a blog post on that. We've been delayed in putting it out, so I apologize for that. But if you want to check out any feature bounties, I'll actually post a link in the calls Q&A chat. But basically, if you go to our Aleo GitHub repo and then go to issues, you can find a bunch of feature bounties there. But again, I'll post a direct list. But that's something else we're looking for people to contribute to. I know there were a couple folks asking me earlier how they could contribute actively to the project. In addition to like our grants program, that's a really good place to start. I think we have 3 that have been completed so far. Now there's a 4th actively being worked on, but I think there's still 5 or so that are unclaimed. So if that's something you want to get involved in, definitely check it out. Sorry, I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, no worries. Alex, like, where do you side on that thing? Like, do you think that the guy did nothing wrong? Well, do you think the guy should be charged or should be able to be charged for exploiting the smart contract, what it was actually able to do?
I mean, personally, I kind of philosophically feel like the guy, he didn't, strictly speaking, do anything illegal, or even, I don't even know if it was ethically wrong entirely. I mean, it's again, I mean, I think his point is, I'm sympathetic to his points. I guess one tough thing is in practical terms that becomes problematic, right? Because I mean, especially on Ethereum, I mean, this is one of the reasons why people, in the kind of the Bitcoin community or really before the advent of Ethereum, were really down on this idea of an on-chain VM that was Turing complete, right? Because with Turing completeness, you can really never be sure how things are going to turn out, and this is, it's impossible to cover every edge case. So there are situations in which, and I'm sure these developers who created this protocol tried their best, and probably had auditors, and despite that, still lost all this money, which is costing them. I'm sure it cost them users. It cost the users.
Yeah, I want to know
money.
who audited this, so I can never use them. What was the
even
protocol again?
like auditors, Indexer or something. I can't remember. It's an article, but it's just. I mean, it's just a fact. I mean, it's literally like it's the Turing. This is just the feature of Turing completeness, so that you just don't know how any program will behave when it's like this, right? And so this is, anyways. And like, by the way, this is kind of a microcosm of the DAO, right? The DAO and Etsy, ETC and Ethereum, and they even reference that in the article. I think it's a little bit of a torture metaphor in the article, and not even the right comparison, because like the DAO was a really interesting moment. It does kind of refute this idea that code is law, in a sense that, but it doesn't really refute the idea of code is law. It's sort of just what is law, right? Like in the Ethereum, in the ETC fork, right, there was a bunch of people who decided, hey, code should be code, and this is like, we can't change it after the fact. But the majority of people, the ecosystem, certainly the influential ones, as it turns out in retrospect, chose actually, no, we're going to break our own principles just this once to do it. And so there's this idea of social consensus that really, as much of an innovation as like this distributed, decentralized network consensus mechanism that we've all come up with, as much as that's interesting, like there is still kind of this underlying social layer that underpins it. And that's the same with the real law, right? Like the real law is just words on paper. Right? And the only reason that it has any power is enough people, enough people in power in whatever system you're in agree that it matters and are willing to enforce it, right? And anyway, that's in this case, like, look, this is like one DeFi app. I think, like, in my opinion, like, they're not going to fork the Ethereum network over this, so it's kind of like I said, it'll be really interesting to see how it plays out. I do think it's dangerous from these guys' perspective, and for any DeFi protocol's perspective. I think it's very dangerous to take this tack because you're effectively admitting you're not decentralized. It's like you're a counterparty. You stole, and I was stolen. This counterparty was stolen from. Well, then the natural next question that is begged is like, well, okay, well, if you're the counterparty, then like, what is this like decentralization thing? And then I mean, you could argue, okay, well, is it a DAO? And I don't know. Like, I think you get into some pretty murky waters that I don't actually think you want to be in. I'm kind of surprised that they're going to take it this far.
Well, I think that there's like this unspoken agreed assumption that you enter into when you use any of these things, and that's like something along the lines of all of this shit is just incredibly experimental. The security that its security has to be hardened via people trying to attack it. So you actually want people to try to attack it. And the newer the protocol is, the greater the risk that there is an exploit out there that someone hasn't found yet. And so the younger it is, the more at risk you are at using it, and you just have to kind of take that into consideration. These things, like as I said earlier, they're ultimately built up from game theory, and like part of what goes into game theory is this like natural adversarialism that you like have to just learn to live with, because it actually is the engine that allows you to have these things in the first place. So if I was a crypto lawyer, I would be up here in Canada. I would be taking this guy's case pro bono to try to defend him. I don't. He did them a favor. I mean, he did the entire crypto world. Okay, maybe he could have, like DM'd them on the back end and like told them. But I mean, I maybe morally he did some. He like didn't do the optimal play here, but I think legally he did absolutely nothing wrong. Yeah. And like
cool.
on this, and like on the social consensus thing, I totally agree. I think that it's more like consensus is law rather than code is law, which maybe isn't necessarily the worst thing. Like if you really, this was something weird for me when I really started like digging deep into like how Bitcoin works, was I realized that so much of how it is secured is not actually cryptographic, and it's actually just purely social consensus. Things like this is one of the things that like got me really curious about Timelock crypto was when I learned that quote unquote Timelock contracts in Bitcoin, like all a Timelock contract is on Bitcoin is it's like, here is a signed transaction that says, pretty please miners, don't include this until X block height. But like the transaction is there in clear text, right? There's no like Timelock crypto that like will only unlock it at the nth block, and so then everyone can see it. Everyone can see that transaction right now, and it's the manner in which you are given assertions that transaction won't be executed till you want is like, that's just part of the Bitcoin protocol that miners have to agree. Okay, Timelock contracts are not to be included until a certain block, and if you get a block with a Timelock contract that has been mined in too early, you're supposed to reject it. I could see a world in which those blocks get accepted for various reasons or things like that. And there's also like even things like the UTXO, like the way that UTXO works in Bitcoin, where not accepting spent transactions is also enforced by the social consensus. Now that makes there's more of a natural incentive for individual miners to enforce that, because they don't want to mess with this like with this supply model that they're probably already very invested in. But still, it's surprising how much of things, even like towards Bitcoin, which is like considered like the granite in terms of security, is actually comes down to social consensus.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's a really interesting interplay. I do want, well, first of all, sorry to take a kind of a right turn here, but first of all, I just wanted to say, wow, amazing showing today. Thanks everybody in the community for showing up. I'm assuming some people are here because they want to learn a little bit more about our incentivized testnet. And Sam, I know we kind of had to talk right before this. I think we should just kind of talk to people what we're thinking about, and get some feedback at a high level. I mean, there's some details that still need to be ironed out, but overall, I think we have a pretty good structure, or at least a structure, enough structure to get feedback from the community. And I think it would be a mistake to waste the opportunity.
Okay. So do you want to just lay it out, and then I will just say what my suggestions were to fix that thing that we've been talking about?
I think we can talk about that after this, but I think in this case,
Okay.
let's just focus on the mechanism
Perfect.
just previously discussed. And you can just ping me on Slack if you got any questions. But Anthony, do you want to lay it out, and then we can just take questions?
Yeah, sure. That makes sense. Yeah, so I know at the beginning of this call I said we were going to put out a blog post. So yeah, after we have this discussion, I guess we'll also just put out the post so it's in a written format. And then again, we can also cover these questions. People want to let it settle in for a little bit and think about it over the next few days. We can talk about it during our community call as well on Wednesday, like we mentioned earlier. So yeah, I think that makes sense. So yeah, I'm pulling up the announcement right here. Basically, I mean, the TLDR is, so first off, we're planning on our planned date to launch this is November 15th, which we talked about at the beginning of this call. And not only is this testnet 2 going to be a technical upgrade from the current testnet, but obviously it's also going to be incentivized, right? Which is why we're having this discussion. I'm sure all of you are pretty much aware of that. What this means is that block rewards earned in testnet 2 will be redeemable for Aleo credits at mainnet launch. So I think we might have mentioned this before, but that's essentially what's going to be happening with the incentivized testnet. And so essentially we're inviting everybody in our community, so all of you, to participate by downloading and running our operating system, which is Snark OS, running a node on November 15th. And you won't need to sign up. So you can basically just go on and run a node by following the instructions on our GitHub repo. And essentially, I would say that some important things to note, and we mentioned this before, is that if you want to actually redeem those Aleo credits during mainnet launch from what you earned during the testnet, everybody will have to complete a KYC. This is because unlike during mainnet where you don't have to do KYC, we're essentially assigning value to tokens that don't exist yet, right? Because they won't exist until mainnet launch. So everybody will have to do KYC. I do want to note, if you participate and run a node on mainnet, you won't have to KYC, right? It'll be like any other decentralized project. That won't happen, but you will have to do it for the incentivized testnet. So I just wanted to get that out of the way. And one other piece that we wanted to mention is that if you are a citizen of the United States or Canada,
Anthony, I gotta cut you off there. That is Alex. We don't want to get that thing out there quite yet.
So I can address this. So look, there's a possibility that we might have to restrict participation in the incentivized testnet to accredited investors only in the U.S. and Canada. Nothing has been finalized yet, but just, I guess, for those of you in here, just know that it's a possibility, and we're working through it. So we can, if there's anyone from the U.S. and Canada in here, ask a question about that, I'm happy to take it. But just, I guess, right now, it's not 100% finalized. Sorry to cut you off, Anthony.
Okay, yeah, no worries. That makes sense. So basically, yeah, some of the principles we're aiming to achieve. So one, ensure that our protocol works. That's probably the most important thing. Second is to maximize participation. So we want as many nodes as possible running on the network. And then the third is to fairly distribute tokens to all participants, and not just big industrial miners. So we really want to be able to allow everybody the opportunity to participate and earn tokens. And so, yes, just going through here. So the incentivized testnet will run for a period of 10 weeks, so from November 15th to January 24th. That's what we're looking at right now. And then the general idea is to reward blocks mined during the incentivized testnet with our testnet tokens, which again will be redeemable for Aleo credits on mainnet. The exchange rate will follow a formula that provides diminishing returns as more blocks are mined. We haven't exactly specified this curve yet, and this is where we would maybe love some of your feedback on the parameters. So if people have thoughts on that, definitely, yeah, feel free to type in the calls Q&A chat. You can raise your hand and maybe we can have a discussion. But it will look something like the following. And again, this is not 100% final, but just what we have thought of so far. So the first block reward will be redeemable 1-to-1 for Aleo credits on mainnet. And then the next 2 to 5 block rewards will be redeemable for 1.5-to-1 for Aleo credits on mainnet. And then after 5 block rewards, they'll be redeemable 2-to-1 for Aleo credits on mainnet. And the reason that we thought about doing it this way is that we don't only want a network dominated by industrialized professional mining companies, kind of what I mentioned earlier. And so by reducing the reward as miners find more and more blocks, this helps favor like the so-called little guys or like individual folks just trying to participate in the network and mine. So we believe that this will increase the appeal of participating in the testnet, hopefully for our community members who run a miner or a smaller number of mining nodes on their own hardware. And yeah, many of you have been here since the beginning. So yeah, your support will be super critical to our success. With that said, we also want to be able to recognize and reward bigger miners on the network too. So even though we want, sort of everybody to have a chance to participate, we do want to have that recognition. So not only will larger mining pools be essential for chain security, but their participation creates a more realistic simulation of our mainnet validator set. So to incentivize these larger miners, we'll have special bonuses for the top 3, 10, and 25 nodes that mine the most blocks during testnet 2. So that's another thing that we're also going to be including in the structure. And one important note, the KYC. The important note was the whole KYC and what Alex just mentioned. So I won't go over that again, but I think that is an important thing to keep in mind. And yeah, as far as
let me just like let me just add on to that a little bit too. So yeah, so I guess just one thing just make sure emphasizing here is like all of this is strictly speaking tentative. Right? Nothing has been 100% finalized. But we consider ourselves to be an open source project. You are our community that's going to take part in this and in a very real way own it after launch, and we want to get feedback. I thought it was important to us to come up with these ideas and open it up to conversation, so we weren't doing it in a vacuum. But look, we have to finalize. There's a lot of different voices that we have to pay attention to. Number one, you all. Number two, we need to make sure everything we do is approved by council, et cetera, et cetera. So all of this stuff is tentative, but it does represent, I think, at a high level, the structure, or certainly the principles that we think are important to achieve. So that's and again, I think that really is making sure that there is upside for mining for not just big time miners, but little guys too. I think that's probably the most important thing, is just ensuring we get some decentralization, or have enough decentralization among the community members who are participating in mining. But also want to make sure we're pressure testing the security of the network. So anyway, Larry, I think Larry's got a question here. Let me see if I can bring it up.
Yeah,
actually, Anthony,
Larry, I invited you up, so you should be able to come. I approved your request, so you should be able to come up on stage if you want. I think you just have to select.
There he is.
Okay,
What's up, Larry?
He's up here now. Hey, Larry. Yeah, you're also muted. So okay, cool.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I just had a few questions. The first is, will there be a differentiation between people running nodes on basic at-home setups versus AWS or cloud servers?
I'm not sure what you mean by difference. Do you expand on that?
Well, so for the incentivized test net, like I guess is there a preference in, or will the rewards, is it just I guess will people using basic consumer hardware be receiving less rewards?
Right. Okay. So to a certain extent, yes. So basically what we're doing is like imagine you just have just a regular old mining distribution system, right? Where it's just like where if you have one ASIC and another dude has 100 ASICs, you are going to basically be getting 1% of the rewards that he's getting, right? So what we're doing is we're starting with that and then we are skewing it so that the smaller guys will get more, right? So maybe and the precise curve that we're doing that is still up in the air and we're still tuning it. But like imagine something along the lines of if you have one ASIC and this other dude has 100 ASICs, you would get let's say 5% of the coins that he would get, or something like
Yeah,
that.
and the way that this would mechanically work is that so one miner, has 100 ASICs that are kind of mining in a pool tied to one address. After 100 blocks, the reward rate that he'll get or he or she will get is halved maybe or applied some discount, right? And eventually the curve, basically it's diminishing returns the more blocks you mine.
Mhm.
Now in the mainnet, we would never be able to enforce this because anyone can join and they could
You wouldn't want to enforce it.
we wouldn't
Right.
want to enforce it, and we would never be able to, since it's a truly decentralized network. People could spin up as many addresses and miners as they want. But in this case, because we're doing a KYC, we'll be, if you run 100 nodes, we'll just sum all the blocks that you mine with your 100 nodes, and then we'll apply. At that point, when our mainnet launches, the idea would be to do, basically, would be to do an exchange of like the testnet blocks for mainnet credit, Aleo credits. Yeah, and we're considering somewhere in the realm of like 1.5 to 2% of the starting supply for this, for the amount of the incentive, but again, not finalized. But yeah, so basically the TLDR, diminishing returns the more blocks you mine. So then if you're a bigger miner, you're kind of incentivized to stop after a while, and then the hash rate should stay low enough such that if you have commodity hardware, just a regular machine, you'll hopefully have a higher chance of mining a block. Does that answer your question? Was that helpful?
Yeah, that clarifies it. And there'll be a chart of this, right? Or in
Yeah.
the
We owe people like the specific number. And by the way, like we haven't even really thought about what the specific diminishing return curve looks like, other than that it's diminishing. I think we initially talked about kind of a quadratic, like a quadratic looking curve. But open to feedback from anyone on what they think is fair. Because look, there's a trade-off here, right? On the one hand, if we stopped rewarding anyone who mined more than one block, like that would not accurately simulate our network. And so it would take away from the point of this from a security perspective. On the other hand, if we just pretend it's mainnet and let anybody with hash rate, it's like your hash rate is basically is like that's the power you have to mine blocks of the network. Well, if you're running like a smaller machine, you're already out of the running even before mainnet. And so, and I think a lot of times in these communities, my feeling, having been in the space for a few years, is that it's the individual community members who come in early, like all of you mostly, who take kind of an extraordinary risk, who spend an extraordinary amount of time in this, that it sucks to not get any reward for that. And we want to make sure this is for them and for you all too. But what's the right number there? I don't know. But yes, the answer to your question is that will be explicit. All of this, by the time we launch on November 15th, this will be very explicit. Everyone will know the rules. The rules will not change. Because I think that would be unfair to people to change the rules halfway through. Now, of course, look, if there's some massive exploit that causes some catastrophe, maybe in that scenario we'd have to look at something. But overall, I think our goal is to not change the rules at all from the beginning to the end. So that's that.
Okay, perfect. Thanks.
Evgeny, you and I were talking a little offline. Oh, and he bounced. Okay. Well,
No, no,
Evgeny and
that-
I. Is he back? I don't know who this Gordon. Anyway, Evgeny and I were talking a little offline about some other projects that have tried to do similar things and some of the pitfalls and issues that they were dealing with. So I think he would definitely be a good guy to get
Awesome.
suggestions from. Yeah.
What do you think, Evgeny?
Yeah, hi guys, thanks for having me.
Oh, you're back. Cool.
Yeah, so I just wanted to suggest experience from other projects is you should not be obliged to set the rules pre-order testnet because all these numbers without simulation or without getting an idea of what will be the total hash rate of the network are not making too much sense, at least to my understanding. So what you can set is dedicate some rewards pool and then look how the testnet goes and then decide the actual diminishing coefficients for the curves, etc.
I see.
Yeah, we talked about this, Sam. So we talked about having epochs initially. And this is effectively what you're suggesting, Evgeny, I think, is like having epochs would let us, like, every 2 weeks, maybe like update the parameters to make sure we're taking into account the like the hash rate and all this stuff. The trade-off there is it's a little bit more complex and it's a little bit more to manage, and we decided to not do that. But I think you make a good point that I probably spoke a little bit too strongly, is that we should, again, we're not committed to these numbers that we're presenting as much as we are to the principles that we're trying to uphold. That said, I do want to try and get it right as much as possible in the beginning if we can, so as to not try and change them. But yeah, I think, Evgeny, you make good points. It's really hard to know what the demand will be before we launch the incentivized testnet. I mean, this is how it is for mainnets too, right? Just because a lot of people on testnet just don't. If there's not an incentivized testnet before mainnet, the hash rate on testnet doesn't indicate at all what the potential hash rate would be on mainnet.
One of the things we could do is, like, I mean, if we just kind of model roughly what's going to happen if it's too high and what's going to happen if it's too low, and then once we know those two things, somehow try to capture both of those potentials and then make it dynamic somehow.
Yeah. One thing,
that would be something we could do instead of doing an epoch. But again, that's more complexity, just in a different dimension.
Well, one thing we could do that might actually be interesting is just maybe have just two epochs, like a pre net and then like the main thing, and like have like the first 2 weeks or something just be a free for all. Anybody mines your blocks, you get the tokens for, and that's just, there's no decay, there's no diminishing returns. Just have the first 2 weeks where anybody can mine, and any blocks you get during that time are yours and you keep them. And then after that, kind of implement this kind of diminishing returns thing. And then that way we have like a better sense of what the hash rate of the network could potentially be. Because I think that seems like there would be the max, if you had a free for all, that would be the max that it would possibly be, right? People would be trying their hardest to put as much power into this network as they could. Whereas, yeah. So I don't know, maybe that's actually a good idea. Maybe we should consider. What do you think of that idea of getting, like, starting off and just having like this kind of free fire period where anything goes, to kind of get a sense for like what the demand's going to be before switching on to this kind of other idea that we proposed?
Yeah, that's a great idea. And the other thing I was thinking is you are not committed to exchange rates, right? As you discussed before, like first block is 1-to-1, fifth block is 2-to-1. So these numbers are just made up and they can be set at the very end after KYC.
Yeah, but wouldn't it be unfair though if we said some numbers at the beginning and then at the end we changed it after you'd spend all this money on cloud hardware? I don't know. That's like my one worry, is people who are going to spend money on running cloud infrastructure might feel slighted if like we make it cheaper at the end, for example.
But one Aleo credit right now is just as much as some made up testnet token, right? Without tokenomics, there is no commitment.
Yeah, that's fair.
So it's-
Although I
Well,
think
that is one possibility, is that this whole quadratic malarkey is just a bad idea, and we should just do 1-to-1.
Yeah,
But I think
like that.
generally people seem to like the idea, at least at an emotional level.
Yeah. And I don't know. I mean, I don't know how many people in here are like represent quote unquote like the industrial miners who like are running significant amounts of hardware and mining lots of networks, and how many people here are just fans of Aleo and other projects like it, and they like to participate in these things. I mean, I used to be like that. I was like a Grin miner back in the day, and I just have like my gaming rig that I would mine Grin, and I didn't really even make money
Nice.
on it, but I just liked it, right? Because I just wanted to support the community. And I'd mined a few tokens, or mined a few blocks, and yeah, so it was fun. So anyway, I think, yeah. Anyway, Evgeny, I think you make a really good point, and this is great feedback for us to kind of consider and integrate. Gordon, I want to give you a chance to I probably screwed up your name, but hey, Gordon, if you want to jump in with your suggestion real quick, I want to make sure we don't run out of time because we're at the last 5 minutes of the call here.
while he's unmuting, may I also add up that as you share. Okay, go.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. So this is Gordijnhoofd speaking. Sorry if my question has been answered maybe already. Joined a bit late, but according to the, say, diminishing return function that you have in mind, let's say quadratic mining, isn't everyone sort of incentivized to sort of generate every time a new address being a new miner, so that you're sort of every time at the beginning of the curve, or is that exactly where the KYC function steps in?
Exactly. If we weren't doing KYC, that's exactly what everyone would just do. They would mine every block they would mine. They would just generate a new address. But here, because you generate a new passport every time you did that, and so maybe people will be clever and figure out how to game that. But I think it's much harder to game. So that's sort of the yeah, that's the idea.
Okay, thank you very much. That's very clear.
What were you going to say, Evgeny?
Yeah, and I just want to reiterate what you're trying to say is about principles of Aleo running the incentives is probably building your core community, your followers, your believers, let's say. So incentivizing those who just drop more money into infra will not help Aleo develop and live good, well, in the mainnet, right?
Exactly. That's like really important to me personally and to our project. I mean, again, we want this to be community owned, and the community consists of both. I mean, players, large and small. So that was the reason to have the quadratic mining.
Yeah, so that's like kind of a community distribution, but more technical ways, technical.
Yeah, exactly. It's a community distribution, but it's in some way, well, it's nice because really, like, you all are contributing, right? It's like it's not just we're giving you, like, you're contributing and earning, right, in a real way, like these tokens. Like, we're kind of managing the exchange, so in the sense it's managed, but this is really, I actually view it that way. It's an exchange as opposed to a distribution, right? You guys are contributing power to the network, and you're earning rewards that the network bestows.
And talking of rewards, we'll get through the mining. I guess there will be some wallet update, right? Functionality of wallets, like balances, at least. But
Yeah,
will there be transfer?
I think so. No, there's not going to be transfer enabled. I don't think for this, for the incentivized testnet, at least, or rather, I think the way we're going to count the rewards is not by tokens, but by blocks. So you can't really transfer blocks to anybody else.
Yep.
So I think that's how we're considering it now. At some point, probably after the incentivized testnet finishes, we'll launch our final mainnet testnet, which will have all the functionality that Aleo should have, right? Transfers, you can deploy applications from Leo, all that stuff. So that should be in kind of sometime earlier in Q1 next year. We'll probably launch that. But yeah, for this, the purposes of this, you will be able to check your balances. Right now, you can do obviously the JSON RPC call. It's a little bit funky, and we're actually looking to integrate into our Explorer like an easier GUI way to just query, basically like you have a node or you have an address, query how many blocks that address is mined, kind of through the web interface of the Explorer. So that's being actively worked on, and because I think that is something that would make the experience a lot better for miner.
Just to be on the same page, are you talking about the query which gives you the blocks mined? Because this one is reset to 0 each time you restart.
Yeah, I know. There's like, it's very buggy, so that is going to get fixed. And the goal is like, look, that query, so that should represent, after it's fixed, the amount of blocks that you have mined. And also you should be able to access that not only through the command line if you're doing a JSON RPC call, but through like the Explorer, you should just be able to enter an address and it should tell you. That's our goal. So
we already have this functionality, by the way, like on our website.
Explorer? Oh,
on our website.
Oh, cool. Nice.
So we were basically looking to develop it more fully functional
Yeah.
Block Explorer.
Yeah. So Evgeny, yeah, just a side note. I actually had a conversation with our head of design at Aleo, and a lot of people were really interested in what you guys built. So I was going to follow up with you separately about that, but maybe there's an opportunity to, like work more closely with you guys to develop out what you guys have already worked on. But I'll follow up with you separately about that. But I just want to throw that out there. People are super interested.
Turco, I want to give you a shot before we run out of time.
Oh, I guess he dropped.
Guess we answered all the questions. Anyway, hey, if you guys
you need to hop, Alex, go ahead. But I'll answer Turco here.
Let's jump. Actually, we both need to jump off, Sam, and have a chat with Sina. But Anthony, if you want to stay on, feel free. Otherwise, guys, if you guys have any questions or feedback about these ideas, feel free and post them. I would just post them for in one of the channels here. I mean, Anthony, maybe you have an idea which channel this should all go in, but I think we should have an open discussion about this and as a community, discuss different ideas to achieve these principles, or share other principles that you think we all should be adhering to or thinking about. So anyway, with that, I got to go. Thanks everybody for being here. It's great to see everyone. Thank you all for your contributions. For all of you who run nodes on our testnet, which I know has at times been buggy. But yeah, no, I really appreciate all of you, and we're excited to be here and excited to launch this. So anyway, with that, you all have a good one.
Yeah, thanks everyone. And like Alex said, I think so. I'll put out the blog post that I went through earlier, which described the core principles, and then maybe I'll set up somewhere where people can continue to write any questions that they have, and then on Wednesday during our community call, we'll pick up this discussion again. So if you didn't have an opportunity to ask something today, please join us on Wednesday, and we will continue from there. But yeah, I also need to hop, so I think I'll have to end it. But yeah, really appreciate everybody joining the ZK Salon today, and look forward to seeing you throughout the week. So thanks so much, and have a good one, everybody.